As we close out yet another Friday the 13th, the unluckiest, for some, and for others luckiest, holiday that has no set month, let's take a look at one of the less liked films in the Friday the 13th series. Jason Goes to You Know Where. I don't swear, so that's all you get. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wasn't he in Manhattan last time? Those of you who are familiar with the franchise. And wasn't he completely destroyed by toxic sludge? Well, it seems there was a comic series which explained some of this, which we will not be looking at because this is the movie, not the comics. Suffice it to say, Jason's back, and he is just as angry as ever. The film opens with a young woman going camping on Crystal Lake, Jason's old stomping grounds, completely oblivious to the danger, until she's in nothing but a towel, as per usual with these kinds of films, and, hello, Jason. He shows up and chases her into the woods, only for a whole bunch of soldiers, or special forces for police, or whatever, show up. Turns out the woman was a secret agent. Anyway, they pump about 1 million rounds into Jason before finally blowing him up. And that's just before the credits. So, wow. Unfortunately, something's not right with Jason's remains, as the coroner in charge of the autopsy, for lack of a better word, considering there's hardly any left, he decides to have a midnight snack in the middle of his examination. Namely, Jason's heart. Ew. And something about this unsavory organ and consuming it causes him to become possessed by Jason's spirit. At which point he takes out his co-workers and a couple of the officers who took out Jason, one of whom is played by Jason himself, Kane Hodder. Yay! Applause, applause, applause. Next we meet a charming young couple whom I'm going to refer to as Mr. and Ms. Final, because he's the final guy and she's the final girl. They're not in a good place. They've separated, she's got a new boyfriend, and he is trying to see his infant daughter because he's not a bad guy, but for some reason she dumped him. We also meet Miss Final's mom, whom I'm going to refer to as Mom, who works at a diner. They are celebrating the demise of Jason with 2-for-1 burgers. Cool. We also meet Duke. He's a bounty hunter who dresses more like a cowboy and less like Boba Fett, sadly. We saw an interview with him earlier about how he thinks Jason's not really gone. His body was just destroyed, but his spirit lives on in others. But he'll need to body swap in order to keep going until he finds a way to come back in his original form. But not only does Duke know how Jason can do that, but he knows Jason's one true weakness, but he won't tell. He's in the diner talking to Mom and failing to get her help. He also runs afoul of the local sheriff, and he gets hauled off to lockup. Cutting back to Jason, after he's apparently swapped with one of the less capable police officers, he quickly gets back into the swing of things by taking out some campers who just wanted to have a good time. And I'm not going to go into too many details because it's not exactly safe for work, but suffice to say, Jason does what Jason does best, and the gore effects are amazing. After Mom finds out about some campers going missing in Crystal Lake, she goes to her cabin to try and pack up to get out of town. She also asks Mr. Final for help. Unfortunately, it's too late. When he gets there, not only does he see that Jason still looks like his old self in a mirror, but sadly, he's already taken out Mom and left. And Mr. Final is basically pinned as the murderer of Mom. So he's sent to jail too. Anyway, enacting some sort of plan, Jason starts tracking down Mrs. Final and her infant daughter, who were at the diner. After a few bodies pile up, Ms. Final tries to find Mr. Final, and at some point we also find out what happens to bodies after they're discarded by Jason. They melt. They get their wits back, and they melt. Seriously, it's pretty nasty. Nastier than this pic. But anyway, then the action cuts to jail, where Mr. Final meets Duke, who, after extracting a payment of broken fingers, weird, he reveals that Jason can get his old body back through the body of another Voorhees. Turns out, Mom was Jason's sister. I don't know why Mrs. Voorhees only referred to Jason as her child, but she was never right in the head anyway, so there you go. So, the only way he can get a body back now is through Miss Final or the daughter, who's just an infant, so yikes. But Ms. Final can potentially destroy Jason once for all. So, after Mr. Final breaks himself and Duke out of jail, they hook up with Ms. Final and their daughter. Ms. Final, having seen what Jason can do after he tore through the diner and its occupants, and they all converge at the old Voorhees house, where they not only find the Book of the Dead from the Evil Dead franchise, which might have just been an interesting prop to have there, or it might tie into Jason's backstory, him being potentially a Deadite. They also find out that Ms. Final's sleazy boyfriend, who works in TV, has taken Mom's body and propped it up somewhere in the house for him to find on camera. And then Jason shows up, a tussle occurs, Jason gets defeated again, and his heart takes the form of a little monster and scurries into the basement. Then we find out two things. One of Duke's knives, when handled by Ms. Final... Well, first we find out that turns out the Voorhees that Jason can use doesn't necessarily have to be alive. So Jason's heart monster, because it transformed into a monster after it left its current body. It crawled into the basement and merged with Mrs. Voorhees, or should I say Mom, to finally come back. But also, we find out that Duke's knife, when handled by Ms. Final, transforms into the bone dagger from Evil Dead 2. A lot of references in this movie. So, after a fight where Duke and the sleazy boyfriend get deep sixed, and Mr. Final gets tossed around a bit, Ms. Final manages to land a solid hit on Jason's heart. Yes, we finally get a shot of the movie. And Jason gets pulled into you-know-where by dirt demons. So the day is saved, and the couple and the baby walk off into the sunset. And unfortunately, this is not where the movie ends, because folks really wanted to tie in with another franchise. Yep, seems Freddy is still kicking in you-know-where, and apparently he has plans for Jason. But we don't get a Freddy vs. Jason movie until a long time in the future, and this setup never goes anywhere, as far as I can tell. So yeah, a lot of the backstory of this movie is on the cutting room floor. Like, apparently Duke may have lost a child to Jason, and then there's the fact that Jason goes from a Manhattan sewer to back at Crystal Lake with no explanation other than a comic, which I don't have. And there are scenes of him sporting a demonic face underneath his mask that were left on the cutting room floor but were in the commercial for the film. And a lot of the effects, gore-wise, are good, but being as the film came out in '93, a lot of the more elaborate effects and dialogue were not exactly up to snuff. But this is a legit part of the franchise, and it has its moments. Like, Jason being Jason is pretty awesome, even though he's only in his old body for the beginning and end. The action sequences are good, and the potential backstory of the Voorhees family is tantalizing, but let's just say this is more of a guilty pleasure film than anything else. So, love it or hate it, it's still a Friday the 13th movie worth seeing at least once, if only to snark at it. This is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, be nice to black cats, especially when they cross your path. And just because a movie is silly, borderlining on stupid, doesn't mean it's not worth a watch. Happy Friday the 13th, folks.